The Krex Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 3,000 years. Their massive ships moved through space like floating cities, each one capable of destroying entire star systems. The reptilian warriors stood 8 feet tall, with scales harder than most metals and claws that could tear through ship hulls. They had conquered every species they encountered, turning proud civilizations into slave colonies. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Death Shadow, watching the holographic display show their latest target. A small blue planet orbited a yellow star in what the locals called the Sol system. The primitive species there had barely begun to explore their own solar system, using crude chemical rockets that moved slower than a Krex child could run. How many of these humans live on the planet? Vextar asked his intelligence officer. Approximately 8 billion, Admiral, the officer replied, his forked tongue flicking out nervously. They appear to be a weak species. No natural armor, no claws, no venom. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours. Vextar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. 8 billion slaves for the Empire. The Emperor will be pleased. He turned to his tactical officer. How long until we reach their world? 12 standard hours, Admiral. Excellent. Prepare the slave ships. This conquest should take no more than a few days. The Krex had perfected their invasion strategy over millennia. They would arrive with overwhelming force, destroy any military resistance in the first few hours, then broadcast surrender demands to the population. Most species surrendered immediately when they saw the massive Krex fleet blotting out their sky. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chun was working late in her laboratory at the Global Defense Initiative headquarters in Geneva. The GDI had been formed 5 years earlier when Earth's governments finally acknowledged they were not alone in the universe. Strange signals from deep space and the discovery of ancient ruins on Mars had convinced world leaders that contact with alien life was inevitable. Sarah's computer chimed with an urgent alert. Long-range sensors had detected something massive approaching the outer edge of the solar system. She pulled up the data and felt her blood run cold. Hundreds of objects, each larger than anything humanity had ever built, were moving toward Earth at incredible speed. She grabbed her phone and called General Morrison, the head of GDI operations. General, we have a situation. You need to see this immediately. 20 minutes later, the general stood behind Sarah's shoulder, staring at the sensor readings. How many ships? Our best estimate is over 500, sir. Each one is at least 10 kilometers long. They'll reach Earth orbit in approximately 10 hours. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Alert all world leaders. Activate the emergency protocols. And, Sarah, how long until our defensive satellites are in position? The orbital defense network won't be fully operational for another 6 months, sir. We only have 12 satellites currently active. The general's face went pale. Earth had been preparing for this day, but they had expected more time. The orbital defense satellites were equipped with railguns and nuclear missiles, but 12 satellites against a fleet of 500 ships seemed hopeless. What about the lunar base? How many people do we have up there? 300 personnel, sir. They have mining equipment and some defensive weapons, but nothing designed for space combat. Morrison made his decision. Send a message to Luna Base. Tell them to prepare for evacuation if necessary. And give me a direct line to every military commander on Earth. We're going to fight. Far from Earth, on a research station orbiting Jupiter, Dr. James Wright was conducting experiments with exotic matter when his colleague burst into the laboratory. James, you need to see the news feeds from Earth. We're about to be invaded. Wright looked at the holographic display showing the approaching alien fleet. His mind raced as he studied the formation. Linda, look at their approach vector. They're not trying to hide. They're coming straight at Earth like they own the galaxy. Maybe they do, Linda replied grimly. What species builds ships that big unless they're used to winning? Wright was quiet for a moment, studying the data. You know what's interesting? They're flying in perfect formation, like they're on parade. When was the last time you saw Earth's military fly like that? Never. Our pilots are too aggressive, too unpredictable. Exactly. Wright pulled up historical data from Earth's military conflicts. Look at this. Every major military victory in human history has come from doing something the enemy didn't expect. The Mongols, the Roman legions, the Allied invasion of Normandy. We win by being unpredictable. You think these aliens are too confident? I think they've been winning for so long they've forgotten what it's like to face an enemy that doesn't surrender. On Earth, the emergency session of the United Nations was unlike anything in human history. Representatives from every nation sat in stunned silence as General Morrison presented the tactical situation. Ladies and gentlemen, we face the greatest threat in human history. Our enemy possesses technology far superior to our own. They have more ships than we have missiles. In any conventional analysis, Earth should surrender immediately. The Russian representative spoke first. General Morrison, what are you recommending? We fight, not because we can win, but because surrender guarantees slavery. These aliens have conquered hundreds of worlds. Every species that submitted peacefully was enslaved. The few that fought, even when they lost, were sometimes allowed to maintain some independence. The Chinese representative leaned forward. What kind of resistance can we offer? Our space fleet consists of research vessels and cargo ships. Morrison activated a holographic display showing Earth's military assets. We have advantages the enemy doesn't expect. Our orbital defense satellites can fire railgun rounds at significant fractions of light speed. Our nuclear arsenal, while primitive by their standards, can still cause massive damage. But our greatest advantage is something they've never encountered, which is human creativity in warfare. Every other species they've conquered fought conventionally, with honor and according to established military doctrine. Humans don't fight that way. We improvise. We adapt. We break rules that other species consider sacred. The American Secretary of Defense stood up. What specific advantages are we talking about? Morrison smiled grimly. Our pilots don't fly in formation unless ordered to. Our soldiers question orders if they think there's a better way. Our engineers build weapons that are supposed to be impossible. The enemy is expecting another honorable defeat. We're going to give them chaos. As the meeting continued, similar discussions were taking place in military headquarters around the world. In Moscow, General Petrov was briefing his staff on unconventional tactics. The Americans have a saying: if you find yourself in a fair fight, your tactics are wrong. These aliens are expecting a fair fight. In Beijing, Admiral Zhang was addressing his submarine commanders. The enemy will control space and the surface, but they've never fought an enemy that can hide underwater for months. Our submarines will be invisible to their sensors. In Tel Aviv, Colonel Rosen was meeting with his Special Forces units. You've trained for impossible missions your entire careers. This is what you've been preparing for. Meanwhile, aboard the Death Shadow, Admiral Vextar was reviewing intelligence reports on human military capabilities. The data was laughably primitive by Krek standards. Chemical rockets, kinetic weapons, and crude nuclear devices. The humans didn't even have energy shields or plasma weapons. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, the humans appear to be mobilizing their military forces. Should we accelerate our attack? Vextar waved a clawed hand dismissively. Let them gather their forces. It will make the conquest more efficient when we destroy them all at once. Have you identified their primary military installations? Yes, Admiral. The humans have concentrated most of their space-capable forces at 3 locations. Something called Kennedy Space Center, a facility in Kazakhstan, and another in French Guiana. Excellent. We'll destroy those first, eliminating their ability to escape the planet. Then, we'll target their major cities until they surrender. What Admiral Vextar didn't know was that humanity's real military strength wasn't concentrated in those obvious locations. Hidden in underground bunkers, beneath the oceans, and in secret facilities around the world, Earth's true defensive capabilities waited. Dr. Chun was back in her laboratory, working frantically to upgrade the orbital defense satellite's targeting systems. She had discovered something interesting about the alien ship's approach patterns. They were following predictable mathematical progressions, as if their pilots had been trained in standardized formation flying. Computer, run trajectory analysis on the lead ships, she ordered. The results appeared on her screen. The alien formation was beautiful in its precision, but it had a fatal flaw. The ships were maintaining exact distances from each other, which meant their movements could be predicted several minutes in advance. She grabbed her communicator. General Morrison, I've found something. The aliens fly like they're performing a ballet. Their formation is so precise we can predict exactly where each ship will be at any given time. Can we exploit that? Yes, sir. Our railgun satellites can fire projectiles that will reach the enemy formation at precisely the moment their ships move into the targeting zone. They won't have time to react. How many ships can we target? Sarah ran the calculations. 12 ships, sir. One for each satellite. It won't stop them, but it might make them think twice about their tactics. As Earth prepared for battle, similar scenes were playing out across the globe. In Australia, mining engineers were retrofitting earth-moving equipment with weapons systems. In Canada, survival experts were preparing to wage guerrilla warfare in the wilderness. In Switzerland, tunnel engineers were creating hidden bunkers connected by underground networks. The human race was doing what it had always done best, adapting to impossible situations by refusing to follow the rules. Admiral Vextar's fleet was now 8 hours from Earth orbit. Long-range scans showed the primitive planet had no significant orbital defenses, just a handful of satellites that appeared to be scientific instruments. The human population was concentrated in large cities that would be easy to target. Victory seemed assured. Admiral, his communications officer reported, "We're receiving transmissions from the planet. They appear to be surrender negotiations." Vextar's eyes glowed with satisfaction. Excellent. Another species has seen the futility of resistance. What are their terms? They're unusual, sir. The humans are requesting a formal meeting in space, with representatives from both sides present. This was unexpected. Most species simply announced their surrender and began preparing for occupation. Are they stalling for time? Possibly, sir. But they lack the technology to escape or mount an effective defense. They may simply wish to negotiate the terms of their slavery. Vextar considered this. In 3,000 years of conquest, the Krex had learned that allowing defeated species to maintain some dignity made them more productive slaves. Very well. Arrange the meeting. But keep our weapons trained on their planet. Any sign of deception, and we'll demonstrate the price of defying the Krex Empire. What Admiral Vextar didn't realize was that the surrender negotiations were actually humanity's first tactical deception. The meeting would take place in precisely the right location to draw his command ships into the targeting zone of Earth's orbital defense satellites. Dr. Sarah Chun watched her screens as the alien fleet adjusted course toward the meeting coordinates. General Morrison, they're taking the bait. The lead ships will be in optimal firing position in 6 hours. Outstanding, Dr. Chun. What about our other preparations? Every military installation on Earth is implementing Plan Chaos, sir. When this battle begins, we're going to show these aliens why humans have never been successfully conquered. General Morrison smiled grimly. The aliens thought they were about to receive humanity's surrender. Instead, they were about to learn why Earth species had survived ice ages, plague, war, and every other catastrophe thrown at them. They were about to discover that humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to survive, and survival made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Krex delegation arrived at the designated coordinates exactly on schedule. Admiral Vextar had brought his flagship and 2 escort cruisers, their weapons powered down as a gesture of diplomatic courtesy. The humans had sent a single small vessel that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts. Ambassador Patricia Williams had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. A former military pilot turned diplomat, she understood both warfare and negotiation. Her ship, the Defiance, was indeed built from spare parts, but those parts included some of humanity's most advanced stealth technology. Admiral Vextar, Patricia's voice came through the communication system. I am Ambassador Williams representing Earth's Global Defense Initiative. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. The massive Krex appeared on her view screen, 8 feet of scaled muscle and predatory confidence. Ambassador Williams, you should be grateful that the Krex Empire offers terms of surrender. Most species in your position would already be extinct. Patricia smiled calmly. Actually, Admiral, we're not here to surrender. We're here to offer you terms. Vextar's translator struggled with the concept. In 3,000 years, no defeated species had ever offered terms to the Krex Empire. I believe there has been a translation error. Your primitive technology cannot challenge the might of our fleet. You're right about our technology being primitive, Patricia agreed. We don't have energy shields or plasma cannons or faster-than-light communication. But we do have something your empire lost a long time ago, which is creativity born from desperation. At that moment, Dr. Sarah Chen's voice came through Patricia's earpiece. Target acquired. All satellites report lock-on. Firing in 10 seconds. Patricia kept talking, her voice steady. Admiral, has any species ever surprised you in battle? Vextar laughed. Surprise requires the ability to do something unexpected. Your species lacks the technological capability for surprises. You know what's funny about humans? We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. Not because we enjoy war, but because we could never agree on anything. That constant conflict taught us something your empire never learned. And what is that? There's no such thing as a fair fight. 12 orbital defense satellites fired simultaneously. Railgun projectiles accelerated to 15% of light speed, each targeting a different Krex ship with mathematical precision. The projectiles were simple tungsten rods, primitive by galactic standards, but moving at velocities that turned them into relativistic weapons. Admiral Vextar had exactly 2.3 seconds to register the incoming projectiles before they struck his fleet. The Death's shadow shuddered as a tungsten rod punched through its forward shields and deep into the ship's hull. Emergency alarms screamed across the bridge as atmosphere vented into space. Report. Vextar roared, struggling to remain standing as his ship listed to starboard. Multiple impacts across the fleet. We've lost the Night Terror and Blood Fawn completely. 7 other ships report severe damage. Vextar stared at Ambassador Williams' image, which remained steady on his screen. How? Your technology is primitive. Patricia's expression hadn't changed. Admiral, you made the same mistake every bully makes. You assumed that because we can't hit as hard as you can, we can't hurt you. But humans learned something important fighting each other. It's not about the size of the weapon. It's about when and where you use it. You destroyed 2 of our cruisers with metal rods. Actually, that was just the opening move. The real battle starts now. Across Earth's surface, hidden installations activated simultaneously. Launch silos disguised as farm buildings opened to reveal missiles with unconventional payloads. Submarine-launched ballistic missiles broke the ocean surface from positions the Krex had never detected. Underground railgun installations that had been camouflaged as mining operations began firing projectiles directly into space. But the most dangerous weapons weren't military at all. They were civilian spacecraft that had been retrofitted with the most human technology imaginable. Improvised weapons systems that violated every principle of conventional space combat. The first wave consisted of cargo haulers loaded with industrial mining charges. Instead of sophisticated guidance systems, they used simple chemical rockets and human pilots flying manually. The Krex point defense systems were designed to stop military missiles with predictable flight patterns, not cargo ships flying like drunk asteroids. Captain Rodriguez piloted his converted mining vessel Lucky Strike directly at a Krex cruiser, dodging defensive fire through a combination of skill and sheer recklessness. GDI control, this is Lucky Strike. Beginning attack run on target designated Tango 7. Rodriguez, you're flying directly into their weapons range. Roger that, control. That's kind of the point. Rodriguez rolled his ship inverted and dove toward the Krex vessel's ventral surface, where their weapons had limited firing angles. At the last possible moment, he ejected his cargo bay and fired his emergency thrusters, rocketing away as 50 tons of mining explosives detonated against the alien hull. The Krex cruiser's shields flickered and died. Secondary explosions rippled across its surface as the mining charges, designed to crack asteroid cores, tore through alien armor like paper. Admiral Vextar watched in disbelief as primitive human vessels attacked his fleet using tactics that defied military logic. How are they penetrating our defenses? His tactical officer was equally bewildered. Sir, they're not following any recognizable attack pattern. Our computers can't predict their movements because they appear to be random. Nothing in warfare is random. Sir, I believe the humans are improvising. Each pilot appears to be making independent tactical decisions. This was incomprehensible to the Krex military mind. Their entire empire was built on standardized tactics, hierarchical command structures, and predictable strategies. The concept of individual soldiers making battlefield decisions without orders was alien to them. On Earth, the battle was being coordinated by General Morrison from his command center, but individual units were operating with unprecedented autonomy. All units, this is command. You know your objectives. Use your best judgment, and remember, if the enemy expects it, don't do it. This message went out to military units across the globe, and the responses were uniquely human. Tank commanders began using their vehicles as impromptu artillery platforms, firing at impossible angles. Submarine crews surfaced their boats to launch missiles directly skyward, then dove deep to avoid retaliation. Fighter pilots abandoned formation flying entirely, turning aerial combat into three-dimensional chaos. The Krex had sophisticated battle management software that could process millions of tactical variables simultaneously. But human tactics weren't following variables the software understood. Each human unit seemed to be operating according to different rules, making the overall battle pattern appear completely chaotic. Dr. Wright, still stationed at the Jupiter Research Facility, was monitoring the battle through deep space sensors. "Linda, are you seeing this data?" His colleague nodded, staring at the tactical display. "The human attack pattern looks completely disorganized, but look at the results. They're actually winning individual engagements." "It's not disorganized," Wright realized. "It's distributed. No central command structure to disrupt, no predictable patterns to counter. The Krex are fighting 50 different small wars instead of one big one. On the surface of Earth, civilian populations were contributing to the battle in ways that would have been impossible for any other species. Amateur radio operators were jamming Krex communications. Computer programmers were launching cyber attacks against alien systems. Even children were helping by using telescopes and smartphone cameras to spot enemy vessels and relay positioning data to military units. The Krex Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never faced an entire planetary population that refused to accept defeat. Most civilized species had clear distinctions between soldiers and civilians. Humans apparently didn't. Admiral Vextar's remaining ships were now scattered across Earth's orbital space, each vessel fighting its own desperate battle against waves of unconventional attacks. "Communications, give me a direct line to the Imperial High Command. We need reinforcements." "Sir, the humans appear to be jamming our subspace communications. We're receiving multiple false signals on all frequencies." "Then, send a courier ship back to Imperial space." "Sir, we've lost all our courier vessels. The humans targeted them specifically during the initial attack." Vextar was trapped. His fleet was cut off from reinforcements, fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. This was supposed to be a routine conquest, not a desperate survival battle. Ambassador Williams' voice came through the communication system again. "Admiral Vextar, are you ready to discuss terms now? You cannot defeat the Krex Empire. We have ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. And you've been fighting the same kinds of enemies for 3,000 years, Patricia replied. "Civilized species with honor codes and military traditions. You've forgotten how to fight a species that plays by different rules. What rules do humans follow? We don't. That's the point. Every other species you've conquered had predictable military doctrines. They fought honorable battles and accepted honorable defeats. Humans don't fight honorable battles. We fight to win." On the moon, Luna Base Commander Colonel Martinez was implementing his own version of unconventional warfare. Using mining equipment as weapons platforms, his 300 personnel had turned the lunar surface into a fortress bristling with improvised defenses. "Command, this is Luna Base. We have visual confirmation of Krex landing craft approaching our position. Luna Base, you are authorized to engage with extreme prejudice." Martinez smiled. "Roger that, Command. Initiating Operation Dust Storm." The Krex landing force expected to face military fortifications and organized resistance. Instead, they encountered something unprecedented: weaponized mining equipment operated by engineers who understood exactly how to collapse underground tunnels and create massive landslides. The lunar surface erupted as carefully placed charges brought down entire crater walls, burying Krex landing craft under millions of tons of regolith. Mining lasers designed to cut through rock proved equally effective against alien armor. Excavation robots became impromptu tanks, their Earth-moving equipment redesigned to move enemy soldiers instead. Back in Earth orbit, the battle had become a three-dimensional maze of debris, disabled ships, and desperate combat. The Krex fleet, designed for overwhelming force against organized opponents, was being picked apart by an enemy that refused to be overwhelmed. Captain Sarah Kim piloted her modified research vessel through the wreckage of a Krex cruiser, hunting for survivors to capture. Her ship, the Curiosity, had been a deep space probe before the war. Now it was equipped with magnetic grapples and a determination to learn everything possible about alien technology. GDI command, this is Curiosity. I've located what appears to be a Krex escape pod. Requesting permission to attempt capture. Negative, Curiosity. That's too dangerous for a research vessel. Sarah ignored the order. Like most humans in impossible situations, she had decided that official commands were merely suggestions. Command, the pod is damaged and defenseless. I'm going to try to bring it in. Using skills learned from years of spacecraft docking procedures, Sarah maneuvered her vessel close enough to the alien pod to engage magnetic clamps. The pod's occupant, a junior Krex officer named Zektar, found himself prisoner aboard a human vessel that smelled of coffee and determination. Human, Zektar hissed through his translator. You have captured me through treachery and deception. Sarah offered him a cup of coffee. Actually, I captured you through persistence and superior maneuvering. Would you like some caffeine? It's a stimulant we use to stay alert during long battles. The Krex Empire does not accept stimulants from inferior species. Suit yourself. Can I ask you a question? How many species have you conquered that fought back like this? Zektar was quiet for a moment. None. Your species, it fights incorrectly. How so? You do not follow proper military protocols. Your units operate independently. Your commanders allow subordinates to make tactical decisions. It is chaos. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. You know what? You're absolutely right. We are chaotic. But here's the thing about chaos. It's really hard to predict, and even harder to defeat. As the battle continued, it became clear that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't any particular technology or tactic. It was their refusal to fight the way defeated species were supposed to fight. They improvised, adapted, and constantly surprised an enemy that had grown accustomed to predictable victories. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, watching his fleet disintegrate under human assault. For the first time in his career, he began to understand why the Krex Empire had grown stagnant. They had become so accustomed to easy victories that they had forgotten how to fight a real war. The humans were teaching them a lesson that would change the galaxy forever. Sometimes the deadliest predators are the ones that refuse to accept their prey. Admiral Vextar made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Faced with an enemy that refused to follow the established rules of galactic warfare, he chose to escalate beyond military targets. Weapons officer, target the human population centers. If they will not surrender, we will eliminate enough of them to break their spirit. The massive plasma cannons of the Death Shadow turned toward Earth's surface. The first target was New York City, home to 8 million humans who had no way to defend themselves against orbital bombardment. The plasma beam lanced down through Earth's atmosphere, a column of superheated energy that should have vaporized everything within a 50-kilometer radius. Instead, it struck something that shouldn't have existed, a massive energy shield covering the entire metropolitan area. Dr. Marcus Webb had been working in secret for 5 years on a project the military thought was impossible. Using principles borrowed from magnetic fusion containment, his team had built an atmospheric shield generator beneath the city. It wasn't military technology at all, but rather an adaptation of power plant systems designed to contain stellar-level temperatures. Shield generators at 93% capacity, Webb reported from his underground bunker. The alien weapon is powerful, but it's just plasma. We deal with plasma every day in our fusion reactors. Similar shield systems activated over London, Tokyo, Moscow, and dozens of other major cities. The Krex bombardment continued, but instead of destroying human population centers, the plasma beams were being absorbed and redirected into massive underground energy storage systems. Admiral Vextar watched in disbelief as his most powerful weapons failed to damage Earth cities. This is impossible. Our intelligence reports indicated no planetary defense systems. Sir, his science officer reported, the humans appear to have weaponized their power generation technology. They're using fusion containment fields as defensive shields. How is that possible? Fusion technology requires massive installations. Sir, the humans have been building fusion power plants for decades. Every major city has at least one. They've simply repurposed them. This was beyond the Krek's understanding of military science. Civilian infrastructure wasn't supposed to be convertible into military systems. The separation between military and civilian technology was a fundamental principle of galactic civilization. But humans, as Admiral Vextar was learning, didn't follow galactic principles. On the surface, the failure of the orbital bombardment triggered the next phase of humanity's defense plan. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a theoretical physicist working on experimental propulsion systems, activated a project that had been hidden in plain sight for 3 years. GDI Command, this is Project Lighthouse. Initiating Phase 2 defensive measures. Around the globe, radio telescopes and deep space communication arrays began operating in perfect coordination. Instead of receiving signals from space, they were broadcasting a focused electromagnetic pulse directly at the Krek's fleet. The pulse wasn't powerful enough to damage the alien ships directly, but it had a different purpose. Every piece of electronic equipment on the Krek's vessels suddenly began receiving detailed technical specifications for human technology, broadcast on every frequency simultaneously. Admiral Vextar's communications officer looked confused. Sir, we're being flooded with data transmissions from the planet. They're sending us blueprints. Blueprints for what? Everything, sir. Power generation, weapons systems, manufacturing processes, even entertainment media. It's like they're trying to give us their entire technological database. Vextar was suspicious. This must be some kind of trap. Why would they share their technology? The answer came from an unexpected source. Zektar, the captured Krek's officer aboard Sarah Kim's research vessel, was having a conversation that would change his understanding of the universe. Human Sarah, he said, using her name for the first time, why does your species broadcast its technical knowledge to us? Do you not understand that we will use it against you? Sarah was reviewing the technical data being transmitted from Earth. Actually, Zektar, I think you should look more carefully at what we're sending you. She pulled up the blueprints on her computer screen. At first glance, they appeared to be straightforward human technology designs. But, as Zektar studied them more closely, he began to notice something disturbing. These specifications, they include failure modes, and safety warnings, and modifications. That's right. We're not just sending you our technology. We're sending you our entire development process, including every mistake we made and every way we found to improve things. Zektar's eyes widened as he understood the implications. You are showing us how to think like humans. Exactly. Because here's the thing about human technology. It's not just about the machines we build. It's about how we approach problems. And once you understand how we think, you'll understand why fighting us is a losing proposition. The technical data transmission continued for 6 hours, flooding Krek's computer systems with terabytes of human knowledge. But mixed within the legitimate technical specifications were subtle messages that went far beyond simple technology transfer. The humans were sharing their history, every war they had fought, every mistake they had made, every time they had faced impossible odds and found a way to survive. The data included detailed analyses of human military tactics, but it also included something more dangerous to the Krek's empire, human philosophy. Concepts like individual initiative, creative problem-solving, and the refusal to accept defeat were embedded throughout the technical documentation. The humans weren't just showing the Krek's how to build better machines. They were showing them how to think differently about problems. Aboard the Death Shadow, junior officers began asking questions that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. Sir, why do we always attack in the same formations? The humans seem to adapt their tactics to each situation. Sir, why don't we allow individual ship commanders to modify their approach based on battlefield conditions? Sir, why do we follow the same conquest protocols for every species? Shouldn't we adapt to local conditions? Admiral Vextar realized that the human data transmission was more than information sharing. It was a form of psychological warfare designed to make his own officers think like humans. Cut off all data reception from the planet immediately. But it was too late. The ideas had already spread throughout his fleet. Krek's officers were beginning to question standard operating procedures, to suggest modifications to established tactics, to think creatively about their situation. On Earth, Dr. Walsh monitored the success of Project Lighthouse from her command bunker. General Morrison, the data transmission appears to be having the desired effect. We're detecting increased communication chatter among the alien vessels, and their formation integrity is breaking down. Outstanding, Dr. Walsh. How long until Phase 3? The orbital mechanics will be optimal in 4 hours, sir. We'll need the alien fleet to remain in their current positions for the plan to work. Phase 3 was humanity's most audacious gambit yet. Instead of fighting the Krek's fleet directly, they were going to move it. Dr. Carlos Martinez had been working on gravitational manipulation technology for asteroid mining operations. His team had developed a method for using controlled nuclear explosions to create localized gravitational anomalies that could redirect the orbits of massive objects. GDI command. This is gravity control. All charges are in position. Detonation sequence will begin in T-minus 30 minutes. What Martinez had created was unprecedented in galactic warfare. A series of precisely timed nuclear explosions in space that would create artificial gravitational wells. The explosions wouldn't damage the Krek's ships directly, but they would pull the entire alien fleet into a gradually decaying orbit around Earth. Admiral Vextar's tactical officer noticed the change first. Sir, our orbital trajectory is shifting. We appear to be losing altitude. That's impossible. Maintain position using thrusters. Sir, we're fighting against some kind of gravitational anomaly. Our engines can't compensate. Vextar watched in growing horror as his massive fleet was slowly but inexorably pulled toward Earth's gravity well. The humans had found a way to use the planet itself as a weapon, trapping his ships in an orbit that would eventually lead to atmospheric entry. How is this possible? Gravity cannot be controlled. His science officer was studying sensor readings that defied explanation. Sir, the humans appear to have detonated nuclear devices at precise mathematical coordinates around our fleet. The explosions have created temporary gravitational distortions. They're using nuclear weapons to manipulate space-time? Yes, sir. It's actually quite ingenious. The energy release from fission reactions creates brief, but intense gravitational fields. By coordinating multiple explosions, they've essentially created an artificial gravity well. Aboard her research vessel, Sarah Kim was explaining the concept to her prisoner. You see, Zektar, humans have been studying gravity for centuries. We know that mass and energy are equivalent, and that both create gravitational effects. We just figured out how to weaponize physics itself. This is madness. You are risking the destruction of your own planet. Actually, we calculated the risks very carefully. The gravitational effects will dissipate in about 6 hours. But, by then, your fleet will either have agreed to negotiations or been forced to retreat beyond our solar system. As the Krek's ships struggled against the artificial gravity well, something unprecedented happened in the history of their empire. Individual vessel commanders began making independent decisions about how to respond to the crisis. Captain Mortek of the cruiser Silent Death ignored standing orders and diverted all power from weapons to engines, breaking free from the gravitational trap, but leaving his ship defenseless. Captain Rixval of the destroyer Bone Crusher chose to maintain weapons power and ride out the orbital decay, gambling that he could hold position long enough for the effect to wear off. Most significantly, Commander Yarseth of the light cruiser Star Ripper did something that had never been done in Krek's military history. She opened direct communication with nearby human vessels and requested a ceasefire to discuss mutual survival strategies. Admiral Vextar watched his fleet disintegrate not through enemy fire, but through the breakdown of military discipline. His officers were thinking for themselves, making tactical decisions based on immediate circumstances rather than established doctrine. Communications: order all ships to maintain formation and await orders. Sir, 7 vessels have already broken formation. Captain Mortek reports that he's initiating emergency escape procedures. Commander Yarseth has, sir, she's actually talking to the humans. The conversation between Commander Yarseth and Captain Rodriguez of the Lucky Strike would become legendary in both human and Krek's history. Human vessel, this is Krek's Commander Yarseth. I propose a temporary ceasefire while we both deal with this gravitational anomaly. Rodriguez, whose mining ship was also affected by the artificial gravity well, responded immediately. Commander, this is Captain Rodriguez. We're willing to discuss cooperation. Do you need technical assistance with orbital mechanics? You would help us? Well, we're all stuck in the same gravity well. Seems like we should work together to get out of it. This concept was alien to Yarseth's military training. Enemies were supposed to fight until one side achieved total victory. The idea of cooperation during combat was unprecedented. Captain Rodriguez, why would you assist enemy vessels? Because you're not our enemies until you're shooting at us. Right now, you're just people stuck in a bad situation, same as we are. As Commander Yarseth worked with human engineers to calculate escape trajectories, she began to understand something that would ultimately reshape the Krex Empire. Humans didn't see conflict as a zero-sum game. They were capable of cooperation even with opponents, if cooperation served mutual interests. The gravitational trap slowly weakened over the following hours, but its effects on the Krex fleet were permanent. Officers who had learned to think independently couldn't simply return to blind obedience. Commanders who had cooperated with humans couldn't forget that cooperation was possible. Admiral Vextar found himself commanding a fleet that no longer operated according to Krek's military doctrine. His officers were questioning orders, suggesting alternatives, and, in some cases, refusing to follow commands they considered tactically unsound. Admiral, Commander Yarseth reported, I recommend we withdraw to a safe distance and request reinforcements. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that our current force structure cannot counter. Commander, you will follow standing orders and continue the attack. Sir, respectfully, continuing the attack will result in the destruction of the remaining fleet. I cannot follow orders that will pointlessly sacrifice my crew. For the first time in 3,000 years of Krek's military history, a subordinate officer had refused a direct order from a superior. The Empire's rigid hierarchy was cracking under the influence of human ideas about individual initiative and tactical flexibility. The battle for Earth was far from over, but humanity had already achieved something more significant than military victory. They had begun to change their enemies, infecting them with concepts that would ultimately transform galactic civilization itself. The galaxy's deadliest predators were discovering that the most dangerous prey were those that fought back by teaching their predators to think differently. The breakdown of Krek's military discipline accelerated over the following 24 hours. What had started as individual officers making independent tactical decisions evolved into something the Empire had never encountered, a full-scale philosophical revolution within their own ranks. Commander Yarseth's cooperation with human forces had not gone unnoticed by other Krex officers. Captain Dexmar of the heavy cruiser Iron Fong found himself in a similar situation when his ship's life support systems began failing after taking damage from human railgun strikes. Instead of following standard protocol and allowing his crew to die with honor, Dexmar made an unprecedented decision. He contacted the nearest human vessel and requested emergency assistance. The response came from an unexpected source. Dr. Amanda Foster, a xenobiologist aboard the research station Endeavour, who had been studying Krek's physiology from captured equipment and biological samples. Krek's vessel Iron Fong. This is Dr. Foster aboard the research station Endeavour. We've been monitoring your distress signals. Your crew is suffering from atmospheric poisoning, correct? Captain Dexmar was startled to hear a human who understood Krek's biology. How do you know our physiological requirements? We've been studying your people since the battle began. Not to harm you, but to understand you. I believe I can help repair your life support systems, but I'll need to come aboard your ship. The idea of allowing an enemy alien aboard a Krex warship violated every military regulation in the Imperial Codebook. But Dexmar's crew was dying, and human ingenuity had already proven capable of solving impossible problems. Dr. Foster, if you attempt treachery, I will personally tear you apart with my claws. Amanda laughed, a sound that seemed to confuse the Crek's captain. Captain, I'm a scientist, not a soldier. I'm more interested in keeping people alive than killing them. Will you allow me to help? 2 hours later, Dr. Amanda Foster became the first human to set foot aboard a Crek's warship. What she found challenged everything both species thought they knew about each other. The Crek's crew watched in fascination as the small, apparently fragile human moved through their ship with confidence and curiosity rather than fear. Amanda examined their life support systems with the same methodical approach she used in her laboratory, asking technical questions that demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of alien engineering. Captain Dexmar, your atmospheric recycling system is actually more efficient than ours, she noted while replacing a damaged filtration component. But you've been running it at maximum capacity for too long. These systems need regular maintenance cycles. Our engineers said the system was designed to operate continuously. It is, but no system is perfect. Even the best technology needs periodic care. Amanda finished her repairs and turned to face the massive Crek's captain. You know what's interesting? Your ship's design philosophy is remarkably similar to human engineering principles. How so? Redundancy, modularity, and robust construction. Whoever designed this vessel understood that things break in unexpected ways, so they built in multiple backup systems and made everything reparable. Captain Dexmar found himself having a conversation unlike any in his military career. The Iron Fong was designed by engineer Zalketh, who believed that elegance meant simplicity, not complexity. Zalketh sounds like someone our engineers would enjoy working with. We have a saying, keep it simple, stupid. Complex systems fail in complex ways. As Dr. Foster worked, other Crek's crew members gathered around, asking questions about human technology and philosophy. For the first time in their lives, they were interacting with an alien species as equals rather than conquerors or conquered. Engineering specialist Vactun was particularly curious about human problem-solving methods. Dr. Foster, why do your people approach technical problems differently than we do? What do you mean? When our systems fail, we consult the technical manuals and follow established repair procedures. But you examine our equipment and immediately begin modifying the design. Amanda smiled. Because every situation is unique. Manuals are great starting points, but they can't anticipate every possible failure mode. Sometimes you have to improvise. Improvise? Make it up as you go along, based on your understanding of how things work. Use creativity to solve problems that don't have standard solutions. This concept fascinated the Crek's crew. Their entire civilization was built on standardized procedures and established protocols. The idea of deliberately deviating from approved methods seemed dangerous, but also exciting. Meanwhile, aboard the Death Shadow, Admiral Vextar was dealing with a crisis that went far beyond military defeat. Reports were coming in from across his fleet of officers and crew members engaging in unauthorized communication with human forces. Worse, many of these interactions were leading to philosophical discussions that challenged fundamental Crek's beliefs. Admiral, his political officer reported grimly, we have a problem that extends beyond tactical considerations. Our personnel are being exposed to human ideas that contradict imperial doctrine, such as individual initiative, questioning of authority, cooperation with non-Crek species, and the concept that military orders should be evaluated for tactical merit rather than followed blindly. Vextar understood the implications immediately. The Crek's empire maintained control through rigid hierarchy and unquestioning obedience. If those principles broke down, the entire imperial structure would collapse. Issue standing orders. No further communication with human forces except for formal surrender negotiations. But the order came too late. The ideas had already spread throughout the fleet, and Crek's officers who had learned to think independently were not inclined to stop thinking just because they were ordered to do so. Commander Yarseth responded to the order with a message that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Admiral, respectfully, I cannot comply with an order that prevents me from ensuring the survival of my crew and the success of our mission. I will continue to coordinate with human forces as tactical circumstances require. This was mutiny, but it was mutiny based on tactical logic rather than emotional rebellion. Yarseth wasn't rejecting authority. She was applying human-style critical thinking to Imperial orders and finding them lacking. Similar responses came from other ships across the fleet. Captains who had experienced the effectiveness of cooperation were reluctant to abandon tactics that worked in favor of doctrine that led to defeat. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chun was monitoring communications between human and Krex forces with growing amazement. General Morrison, you need to see this data. The alien fleet is experiencing some kind of internal breakdown. What kind of breakdown? Their command structure is fragmenting. Individual ships are making independent tactical decisions, and some are actively cooperating with our forces. It's like they're learning to think like humans. General Morrison studied the communication logs and tactical displays. Dr. Chun, I think we're witnessing something unprecedented. We're not just defeating an enemy fleet, we're converting them. The conversion process accelerated when Captain Rodriguez made a suggestion that would change galactic warfare forever. During a joint planning session with Commander Yarseth to coordinate asteroid mining operations in the outer system, he proposed something revolutionary. Commander, what if we shared technological resources? Your ships have superior energy systems, and our mining equipment has better precision control. We could accomplish more working together than either of us could alone. Captain Rodriguez, we are supposed to be enemies. Says who? I mean, your empire told you to conquer us, and Earth told us to resist you. But what if there's a third option that works better for everyone? Commander Yarseth considered this with the analytical thinking she had learned from human engineers. You propose cooperation instead of conquest. I propose partnership. Your people have impressive technology and organizational skills. Humans have creativity and adaptability. Imagine what we could accomplish together. This conversation took place on an open channel, monitored by ships from both fleets. The concept of voluntary cooperation between species, rather than conquest and subjugation, spread through Krex forces like a virus. Captain Dexmar, whose crew had been saved by Dr. Foster's intervention, was the first to openly endorse the partnership concept. Admiral Vextar, I recommend we consider the human proposal for technological cooperation. Our mission was to acquire resources for the Empire. Partnership with humans could yield more resources than conquest. Captain Dexmar, you are suggesting collaboration with an inferior species. Sir, respectfully, the species that defeated our fleet through superior tactics and innovative technology cannot be considered inferior. Perhaps our definitions need to be updated. Similar conversations were taking place throughout the Krex fleet. Officers who had been taught that aliens were either conquerors or conquered were discovering a third category: partners. The transformation wasn't limited to military personnel. Krex civilians aboard the fleet's support vessels were also being exposed to human ideas through cultural exchanges that began when human medical teams assisted with injured alien personnel. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had organized emergency medical response teams that treated Krex wounded with the same care they provided to human casualties. The alien medical staff who observed these operations were amazed by human medical ethics. Why do you treat our injured personnel? Asked Chief Medical Officer Esikavar. We are invaders of your world. Because they're injured, and we can help, Dr. Walsh replied simply. Medical ethics don't depend on political status. You have rules that require you to help enemies? We have principles that require us to help people who need help. The fact that your government sent you to attack us doesn't make your medical needs less important. This concept of universal medical care, applied regardless of species or political affiliation, was completely alien to Krex culture. In the Empire, medical resources were allocated based on social rank and military utility. The idea of treating enemies with the same care as allies challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of civilization. As the medical exchanges continued, Krex personnel began to understand that human society operated according to principles that transcended immediate tactical advantage. Humans helped others not because it benefited them directly, but because they believed helping others was inherently valuable. These philosophical revelations had practical consequences. Krex officers who understood human motivations could predict human behavior more accurately, leading to more effective cooperation. But the deeper understanding also led to uncomfortable questions about the imperial system itself. Engineering specialist Vacton, working alongside human technicians to repair battle damage, asked a question that would resonate throughout the fleet. If humans treat their enemies with dignity and respect, how do they treat their friends and allies? The answer, demonstrated through countless small interactions over the following days, was that humans treated allies with loyalty, generosity, and trust that exceeded anything in Krek's experience. Captain Rodriguez shared technical specifications freely with Commander Yarseth, trusting that she would use the information responsibly. Dr. Foster taught Krek's medical staff advanced surgical techniques without requiring anything in return. Human engineers worked around the clock to help repair alien ships, motivated by professional pride and simple human kindness. For Krek's personnel who had lived their entire lives in a hierarchy based on domination and fear, exposure to a culture based on cooperation and mutual respect was profoundly disorienting. But it was also appealing in ways they had never imagined. The final breakdown of Imperial discipline came when Admiral Vextar ordered his fleet to resume bombardment of Earth cities. The order was met with something unprecedented in Krek's military history: coordinated refusal to comply. Commander Yarseth spoke for the entire fleet. "Admiral, we cannot, and will not fire upon civilian population centers. Such an action violates tactical logic, strategic necessity, and basic morality." "Commander, you are relieving me of command?" "Sir, we are relieving you of the burden of ordering actions that will destroy both our fleet and our honor. The human species has demonstrated capabilities and values that make them valuable potential allies rather than expendable slaves." The mutiny was complete, but it was a mutiny unlike any in galactic history. The Krek's officers weren't rebelling against authority. They were choosing to follow a higher authority based on logic, ethics, and effectiveness rather than tradition and fear. Admiral Vextar found himself commanding a fleet that had learned to think like humans. They were still Kreks, still loyal to their species and their principles, but they now understood that blind obedience to destructive orders was neither loyal nor principled. The galaxy's deadliest predators had been tamed not through force, but through education. They had learned that the strongest species was not the one that conquered others, but the one that inspired others to become better versions of themselves. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy watched in stunned silence as the impossible became reality. The Krek's Empire, rulers of the galaxy for 3 millennia, formally requested membership in the newly formed Terran-Kreks Alliance. The ceremony took place aboard the space station Harmony, jointly constructed by human and Kreks engineers in Earth orbit. The station itself represented everything that had changed. Instead of the standardized Imperial architecture or purely human design principles, it combined the best elements of both cultures into something entirely new. Admiral Vextar, no longer commanding the fleet but serving as the Krek's ambassador to Earth, stood beside President Chun of the Global Defense Initiative as they signed the historic accord. The old admiral had spent the past 3 months learning to think in ways that would have been impossible under the rigid imperial system. "President Chun," he said, using the careful diplomatic language he had learned from human negotiators, "the Kreks people formally request partnership with humanity in the exploration and development of galactic civilization." "Ambassador Vextar," President Chun replied, "humanity accepts the Kreks people as full partners in building a better future for all species." The words were simple, but their implications would reshape the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, a galactic empire had voluntarily abandoned conquest in favor of cooperation. The transformation hadn't been easy. On the imperial homeworld of Kreks Prime, the news of the fleet's philosophical contamination had triggered a political crisis that nearly led to civil war. Traditional imperial factions demanded that the corrupted fleet be destroyed and Earth reduced to radioactive ash as an example to other potential rebels. But the contamination had spread beyond the expeditionary fleet. Kreks civilians who learned about human principles through data transmissions began questioning their own society's fundamental assumptions. Scientists who studied human technology discovered that innovation required the kind of creative thinking that imperial doctrine discouraged. Military strategists analyzing the Earth campaign realized that human tactics were superior precisely because they weren't limited by traditional thinking. The civil war that many predicted never materialized because the transformation was ultimately logical rather than emotional. Krex society was built on the principle that superior methods should replace inferior ones. Once enough Krex citizens understood that human approaches to problems often yielded better results than imperial methods, the change became inevitable. Empress Kafthara herself had made the final decision after reviewing detailed reports from the Earth expedition. If these humans have developed superior methods of organization, problem-solving, and resource allocation, she announced to the Imperial Council, then adopting those methods serves the Empire's interests better than destroying the humans. But adapting human methods meant abandoning the rigid hierarchy and unquestioning obedience that had defined Krex civilization for thousands of years. The empire that emerged from this transformation was barely recognizable as the same entity that had once terrorized the galaxy. Commander Yarseth, now Admiral Yarseth of the Krex exploration fleet, had become one of the most vocal advocates for what historians would call the Great Reformation. The humans taught us that strength comes not from dominating others, but from inspiring them to achieve their potential. An empire built on fear is ultimately weak because it wastes the talents of its subjects. The practical results of human-Krex cooperation were immediately apparent. Joint engineering teams had developed new technologies that neither species could have created alone. Krex expertise in energy systems combined with human creativity had led to breakthrough innovations in faster-than-light travel, planetary defense, and resource extraction. Dr. Amanda Foster, now serving as Director of Xenobiological Studies at the Joint Research Facility on Luna, had become an unofficial ambassador between the species. Her work treating injured Krex personnel during the battle had evolved into comprehensive studies of alien biology that benefited both civilizations. The fascinating thing about working with the Krex, she explained to a gathering of Earth's scientific community, is that they approach problems with systematic thoroughness that complements our intuitive creativity. When Krex methodology combines with human innovation, we consistently achieve results that surprise everyone. The partnership wasn't limited to technology and science. Cultural exchanges had revealed unexpected similarities between human and Krex values. Both species valued competence, loyalty, and achievement. The difference had been that humans applied these values through cooperation, while the Krex had applied them through domination. Captain Rodriguez, who had become something of a legend among both humans and Krex, now commanded a mixed crew aboard the exploration vessel Pioneer's Dream. His ship was staffed equally by human and Krex personnel, creating a working environment that challenged both species' assumptions about interspecies cooperation. At first, the Krex crew members expected orders to be followed without question, Rodriguez explained to new joint crew commanders. And, at first, the human crew members expected to argue about everything. We had to find a middle ground where Krex discipline combined with human flexibility to create something better than either approach alone. The middle ground they had found was a command structure based on expertise rather than species or rank. Decisions were made by whoever had the most relevant knowledge and experience, regardless of whether they were human or Krex. This meritocratic approach had proven so effective that it was being adopted throughout both civilizations. Engineering specialist Vaktan, now Chief Technology Officer of the Joint Mining Operation in the Asteroid Belt, had discovered that human and Krex engineering philosophies were remarkably compatible when freed from the constraints of imperial doctrine. Humans designed for adaptability and Krex designed for durability. He explained to a mixed audience of engineers from both species. When we combine those approaches, we create systems that are both robust and flexible. Our joint asteroid mining operation is extracting 3 times more resources with half the equipment because we're using the best ideas from both species. But the most significant change wasn't technological or economic. It was the emergence of a new galactic civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than conquest and submission. The Terran-Krex alliance had become a magnet for other species throughout the galaxy. Worlds that had been subjugated by the old empire began requesting membership in the alliance. attracted by the promise of partnership rather than domination. The Zinthari, a species of aquatic traders who had been enslaved by the Kreks for over a century, were among the first to join. Their representative, Ambassador Kelpshore, addressed the Alliance Council with words that captured the transformation taking place across the galaxy. For generations, my people believed that galactic civilization meant the strong ruling the weak. The Alliance has shown us that true civilization means the strong helping the weak to become strong. Similar sentiments echoed from species across the galaxy. The Valdari Crystal Builders, the Mokith Nomad Fleets, the Yithrak Collective Minds, all were drawn to an alliance that offered partnership and mutual development rather than conquest and exploitation. Dr. Sarah Chun, now serving as Earth's Minister of Galactic Affairs, had become one of the Alliance's primary diplomatic theorists. What we're seeing, she explained to the Galactic Development Council, is the emergence of a civilization based on symbiosis rather than parasitism. Instead of one species draining resources from others, we're creating networks where each species contributes its unique strengths to the collective benefit of all. The old Krex Empire hadn't disappeared entirely. Traditional Imperial factions still controlled several dozen star systems on the galactic rim, where they continued to practice the conquest-based policies that had once ruled the galaxy. But these holdout regions were increasingly isolated and economically disadvantaged compared to Alliance territories. Admiral Vextar, reflecting on the transformation during a joint human-Krex military exercise, offered a perspective that captured the magnitude of the change. 3 months ago, I commanded the most feared fleet in galactic history. Today, I serve in a force that is far more powerful because it fights not to destroy enemies, but to create allies. The exercise itself demonstrated this principle. Instead of practicing invasion and conquest scenarios, Alliance forces were training in disaster relief, planetary protection, and cooperative exploration missions. The same ships and personnel who had once spread fear across the galaxy were now spreading hope. The philosophical revolution that had begun with individual Krex officers questioning orders had evolved into a galactic movement that challenged the fundamental assumptions of interstellar civilization. For the first time in recorded history, a significant portion of the galaxy was organized around the principle that cooperation was more effective than competition. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the transformation was that it had been voluntary. No species had been forced to adopt human values or abandon their cultural traditions. Instead, the Alliance had demonstrated that cooperation enabled each species to achieve its goals more effectively than conquest or isolation. The Krex hadn't stopped being Krex. They remained disciplined, hierarchical, and intensely focused on achievement. But they had learned to channel these traits toward building rather than destroying, toward elevating others rather than subjugating them. Humans hadn't changed their fundamental nature either. They remained creative, argumentative, and resistant to authority. But they had learned to apply these traits in partnership with species who complemented their strengths and compensated for their weaknesses. As Ambassador Williams addressed the first Galactic Cooperation Summit, her words captured the essence of what had been accomplished. We didn't defeat the galaxy's deadliest predators. We taught them that the strongest hunters are those who teach their prey to become hunters too. And, in doing so, we created a galaxy where no one needs to be prey. The summit was attended by representatives from over 200 species, including many who had never before participated in galactic civilization. The Alliance had demonstrated that there was room in the galaxy for everyone, regardless of their technological development, cultural background, or physical capabilities. The closing ceremony featured a joint human-Krex choir performing a piece that had been composed collaboratively by musicians from both species. The harmony they created was unlike anything in galactic history, not because of its technical complexity, but because it represented voices that had once been enemies choosing to sing together. As the ceremony concluded, President Chen offered a final reflection. Today we celebrate not the end of conflict, but the beginning of something better. We've learned that the galaxy's deadliest predators can become its greatest protectors when they choose cooperation over conquest. The applause that followed included not just humans and Krex, but representatives from species across the galaxy who had found in the alliance a vision of civilization that offered hope rather than fear. The Battle of Earth had lasted only days, but the war it ended had been fought for millennia. Not a war between species, but a war between philosophies, between the belief that strength meant dominating others and the discovery that true strength meant empowering others. Humanity had won that war not through superior weapons or tactics, but through superior ideas. And in teaching those ideas to their former enemies, they had created something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization built on the radical notion that everyone could win. The galaxy's deadliest predators had learned that the most dangerous prey were those who refused to remain prey, who instead offered predators the chance to become something better than mere hunters. And in accepting that offer, the Kreks had discovered what humans had known all along. The greatest victories are those that create no losers, only partners in a future that belongs to everyone.